The Labour Party has changed, something Keir Starmer insisted upon the public in the run up to the 2024 general election. And who can forget these famous words he spoke in 2023 when he confirmed that former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn would not be allowed to run for Parliament as a Labour candidate?
If you don't like that, if you don't like the changes that we've made, I say the door is open and you can leave.
What was meant as a rhetorical device signalling a break with the socialist platform championed by Corbyn's Labour has become a prophecy for the nightmare that has been Labour's tortuous first year in office. Record low approval ratings, their lowest recorded polling numbers in history, widespread derision by the entire electorate, and membership numbers that are so embarrassing for the party they haven't even published them since February. This has been happening alongside dictatorial control over internal party processes, which have silenced dissent and alienated Labour's base. And even their elected representatives who have been loyal to the party for many years have jumped ship. In Nottingham, 6 councillors have resigned from the party today to create a real socialist opposition to Labour's failure. Councillors Kirsty L. Jones, AJ Matsiko, Faith Gakandejala, Imran Jalil, Anwar Khan and Naeem Salim have formed the Nottingham People's Alliance, who will sit as the official opposition on Nottingham City Council. They're not the first councillors in Nottinghamshire to leave Labour and sit as a new electoral grouping either. In January this year, in the neighbouring borough of Broxtowe, 20 councillors left Labour en masse in similar fashion. They currently sit as a minority administration, the Broxtowe Alliance, meaning that along with the left-wing alliance in Nottingham and otherwise in nearby Gedling, there is a broader alliance umbrella developing locally to oppose the Labour colleagues they previously sat with. So why have they decided to leave? Here's NPA councillor Kirsty L. Jones explaining why.
The Labour Party stopped the majority of councillors in Labour Group from even having a say in policy making or the political strategy of the council by imposing its leadership, doing what they're told by London, and provide no criticism of this failing Starmer government. This means that we can no longer effectively represent our residents or speak openly about our views. This has led to poor decision making and incompetent governance of Nottingham City Council. Instead, we have seen the Labour Party make the same mistakes nationally that we have experienced first-hand locally, completely ignoring their manifesto and instead cutting winter fuel allowance, slashing disability benefits, using resources on local government reorganisation rather than meeting residents' needs, and copying the Reform Party's rhetoric, demonising migrants, refugees and other minorities, rather than resolving the real issues that people face. Nottingham is a diverse and welcoming city. Our residents have a mixed up international backgrounds and connections. And it is important for us to be able to campaign and speak freely on the domestic and international issues which concern us. Instead of taking strong, decisive action on the genocide committed by Israel against Palestinians, the Labour government has focused on criminalising people, supporting direct action against the perpetrators of war crimes. As Labour councillors, many of us have been punished for speaking out about the liberation of Palestine. This is deeply concerning for all our civil liberties, as well as horrifying how little value they place on humanity.
I mean, it's a pretty good summation of Labour's year so far. It's pretty embarrassing for the party that they can be torn down so easily. But it's true. It's all true of the reality of what people who voted Labour their whole lives are looking at the current Labour Party and what they've done. Really basic stuff that the Labour Party should be doing, such as protecting the welfare state, commitment to human rights and internationalism. Remember Harold Wilson saying that the Labour Party is a moral crusade or it is nothing? Well, in these people's opinions, clearly it is now nothing. I also spoke to Kirsty at their press release earlier today, and I started by asking her if the problems with the Labour Party extended to both a local and a national level.
They can't be separated at the moment, so our leadership was imposed by the central party. So, Keir Starmer on the NEC, they decided that we weren't able to elect our own leadership, probably because they had suspicions that we would elect a more socialist-leaning one and try and do something radical like community wealth building in Nottingham, which they can't stand at the moment. So instead, we've had to form this new progressive alternative because our voices aren't getting heard and we're not representing residents. The residents are suffering at the end of the day. They've got the cost of living crisis, they've got no services to help them. we need to do something different.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what would you say to other people who are, at this point, still Labour members or Labour councillors who feel like they're in a similar position? They feel like that the current leadership doesn't represent the values that they originally had when they joined the Labour Party. And what would you recommend?
Yeah, I think all of these things have to be taken on an individual basis. So I think as a normal party member, you might have a different perspective than if you were a councillor or an MP, for example. As a member, you might think that there's still potentially manoeuvring space within Labour, but the way that they're shutting down democracy, I think that it's quite hard to actually get anything across. And there's so many other alternatives popping up now across the country, whether it's independent groups on councils or, we don't know where your party's going. The Green Party's obviously had a massive surge. There's clearly an alternative sort of desire in the public for something different, something more on the left. We've got the threat of reform, and I think that we need to have something real to tell people on where the issues that they're facing has come from. It's not migrants, it's the rich, and it's the fact that we're not structuring society properly. So I think there might be some people who feel that they can still push that message within Labour. I think it's hard to do that now, but there's these alternatives outside Labour too, and I think we've all just got to communicate together and make sure that we try and fight off this threat, basically.
So you're feeling that without a proper threat for Labour on their left, they would be complacent in terms of actually providing the kind of change that was promised in the run-up to the election in 2024, and indeed, I'm assuming was promised in terms of the administration of Nottingham City Council as well. Unless that change manifests, we're going to, as you say, be looking at a move to the right, which we don't want.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think the only way that there can be manoeuvring space for the left within Labour at the moment is if they have that challenge outside, because at the moment Labour just take vast communities' votes for granted because they feel like there's nowhere else to go, but there is somewhere to go now. Aping the rhetoric of reform is not going to help the Labour Party to get any extra votes, because people who would vote for reform will vote reform, right? They're not going to go for a watered down version of this racism. The left is the only way to properly challenge this, and I think, like I say beforehand, there's less manoeuvring space within Labour, so the only option I've seen for myself and our colleagues have seen together is to leave Labour and form Nottingham People's Alliance.
And this isn't the only defection the Labour Party have been hit with today either. Councillor for Frome Vale, Al-Saeed Al-Maghrabi, has left the Labour Party to join the Green Party, who already hold control of Bristol City Council in a minority and who will now have exactly half the seats on the council. Al-Maghrabi said this about his decision to leave Labour and join the Greens. While today I am leaving the Labour Party, this is only because it has become apparent over time that the party has left me. I no longer recognise the values of fairness, compassion and social justice that inspired me to join, values that I now recognise in the Green Party. From refusing to tax wealth, continuing to enable genocide, and echoing Reform's divisive rhetoric on immigration, I and many others have been deeply disappointed with the direction of the national leadership. I will never stop standing up for equality, justice, and the right to speak truth to power. These are the same principles that first brought me into public life, and principles that I now find in the Green Party. I'm incredibly excited to join the Greens, to put hope back into the politics of Bristol. When councillors resigned from Labour after Keir Starmer endorsed war crimes on LBC in 2023, a Labour Party source was quoted as saying they were shaking off the fleas. It turns out that those fleas were actually some of Labour's most loyal supporters, including their own elected representatives. Dahlia, what do you think these community parties will have as an effect? And is there any way that the Labour Party can be salvaged at this point?
That's a really, really difficult question. I don't know if the Labour Party can be salvaged at this point, certainly not under this leadership. There are always going to be, as more and more people defect from the Labour Party, whether it's MPs or local politicians, there's always, Labour's always going to be able to fill those gaps with careerists of all kinds of stripes. But the problem is that careerists actually don't tend to make very good or popular local politicians, because they don't actually tend to be committed to serving local people and, doing casework and getting involved in local campaigns. They just see it as sort of one rung in the ladder towards their wherever they're trying to get to. So the councillors and the people who really are working for their community and are more likely to be popular within their community are not the ones I would assume that are staying in the Labour Party, but are actually very frustrated with how, as Kirsty outlined in that clip, how hamstrung they feel from delivering from their community because of the sort of iron grip that the Central Labour Party holds on them. And I have to say, I am so glad to see all these alternative political vehicles emerging. Now is the time to build something different, because Labour have always relied on, you lot have nowhere else to go. Where are you going to go? The Tories? You know, if you're working class, if you're disabled, if you're a person of colour, you're not going to go to the Tories. All you can do is go here. And they've been using that to discipline us into co-signing programs that have fallen way short of what we deserve. And now at this moment in history, that idea of where else can you go is just not going to cut it anymore, because, you know, the rise of reform has shown us many ugly things about this country, but it's also shown us that that two-party system is failing, and that at this moment it is possible for a third party to break through. And now the Greens are showing us that there's no reason why that party that breaks through has to be a far right one. So I am really glad that people really rooted in their community are taking this action, and it's very brave and it's very bold, and it's amazing. The question is how do we sort of consolidate this power that is away from just kind of local pockets into an electoral vehicle that can really make a difference. And that is quite difficult to do in British politics, because we don't have a tradition of coalitions between parties. But I think it requires some really imaginative, innovative thinking about how do we bring, you know, the work that's happening around the Green Party, the work that's happening in these more kind of independent local groups, and also the things that are coalescing around your party. How do we make sure that that gets consolidated into a united front? I saw a clip earlier today of what was her name, Kathy Hochul, who is the governor of New York, and she's a sort of traditional establishment Democrat, and she was opening a rally where Zoran Mamdani was speaking. And, you know, this is someone who has climbed up the ranks of the Democratic Party, very much sits within an establishment politics. And, you know, she got up on stage and she was just drowned out by people shouting, "Tax the rich." And they only stopped when Zoran Mamdani came out and held her hand. And in that moment, you could see that it dawned on her that her political career is nothing without the Mamdani coalition. And that's the same signal that we need to send to people in the politically powerful in this country, that you will not be able, whatever party you are, you will not be able to govern without taking into account the concerns of this coalition that is building and growing. And as far as the Labour Party are concerned, they deserve everything that is happening to them. I read somewhere today that the Labour government, the current government, is less popular than Prince Andrew, which is that's a real achievement. Honestly, even my worst nightmares could not have imagined that they would have been able to clear that bar, which is in hell. But they absolutely deserve it, because I have never seen such an effective coalition building project where the coalition that you're trying to build is the widest cross-section of pissed off people in British society. Like, they're alienating the left by pandering to anti-immigration politics, by pandering to a genocidal state. They're alienating older voters by scrapping the winter fuel benefit. They're alienating younger voters by refusing to deliver on the things that younger voters care about, like wealth distribution, stuff on climate. They're alienating the poor by cracking down on benefits. And they're bringing in policies that politically engaged people across the spectrum hate, like digital IDs. So it's like, if you're going to, when the grown-ups in the room come in, and the grown-ups in the room decide to create a program that literally brings together the widest cross-section of people in British society in hatred of your project, what did you expect was going to happen? Well, what they expected was going to happen was that the British people would feel like they had so little choice that if you didn't want reform to get into power, you would have to vote for Labour. But what the Green Party is showing, and what these alternative political vehicles that are popping up around the country are showing, is that that is not how this is going to play out. It might have played out like that 10 years ago, but that's not how it's going to play out now. The question is, how does that consolidate into something that is united and is a cohesive political vehicle? And that is the challenge that we face.
It was incredibly perceptive of you to talk about the fact these people are rooted in their community very specifically. I didn't play the full clip of Kirsty's speech at the press release earlier today. The full clip is on Twitter. You can go and find it and watch it all in full. And one of the first things that they talk about broadly is about the failures of Nottingham City Council locally, outsourcing services, failure on dealing with the problems of homelessness, things such as closing community centres and libraries, these kind of basic things that people in the community really care about. And you can tell from the conversations that I had with people in the press release earlier today that they do genuinely care. They really want to be able to serve the people that they're there to represent, that elected them, on, a promise of change, a promise of hope, a promise of delivery for what people genuinely care about in the local area. And Milan Radulovic, who is the leader of Broxtowe Council, who is a member of the Broxtowe Alliance, who was there, made a very important point here, which is that, the people are there to elect their representatives, and that's what their representatives are there to do, and to represent them, and not the other way around. And fundamentally, if you don't have a political project that brings people along democratically, both within the party and outside the party, then you will never actually represent the people. You will never actually be beholden to the interests of your constituents rather than central party policy. And the fact that they are making sure that they're there to represent Nottingham specifically, forming a community independent party, shows you just how much they do care about the people who live around in those communities. And it's bigger actually for them than just about whether the Labour Party is good or bad. They really have this genuine connection to their electorate, which you don't see amongst the career politicians in Westminster.